You know, have you ever wondered if that search for meaning, that need to understand our place in the universe, is actually hardwired into us, like right into our DNA? Well, the source material we're looking at today dives into this really fascinating and, yeah, pretty controversial theory that says it is. And believe it or not, it all kicks off with one single question. A question so basic, it just might define what it means to be human. Where did I come from? I mean, think about it. We've all asked that, right? It's this question that kind of pops into our heads when we're kids and never really goes away. And it's something that seems to separate us from, well, every other living thing on this planet. So what if that question isn't just, a deep thought we have late at night? What if it's an actual core function of our biological programming? Well, according to the author we're looking at, this one single question is the absolute key. They argue that it points to a feature of the human mind that didn't just evolve over time. No, they claim it was installed. Yeah, you heard that right. Installed. So let's unpack what that even means. Okay, so to get this, we've got to start with the core analogy the author uses. And for a minute, I want you to forget about biology. Instead, the author wants us to think of our brain as, well, as a piece of hardware, like the central processor in a computer. The term the author uses is physiological hardware, basically our physical brain. But here's the really important part of that idea. Hardware, any hardware, needs to be used, right? It needs exercise, it needs upkeep. The argument here is that our brain isn't some passive organ just sitting there. It's a system that you've got to maintain to keep it running at its best. All right, so if the brain's the hardware, then what's the software? What's the program that's actually running on it? Well, the author calls this the thinking function. You can think of it as our mind's operating system. And according to them, this system is unbelievably powerful, but it's also surprisingly vulnerable. So inside that main thinking function, that big operating system, the author says there's a very specific, dedicated subprogram. And honestly, this is where the theory gets really controversial. They call it the function of faith. And according to the source, this is a built-in faculty, a tool, if you will, that actively pushes humans to look for a creator. Now, pay close attention to the language here. The claim isn't that this is a cultural thing or a personal choice we make. No, the argument is that it's a fundamental, pre-installed piece of our cognitive software. It's already there when we're born. So you might be asking, what's this function even for? Why would it be there? Well, the author says it works in 3 stages. First, it gets us to look up, to think about the macro, the big picture. Then that curiosity pushes us to explore, to try and figure out how the world works. But, and this is the final step, the author claims the ultimate destination for that drive is the search for a creator. Now, that is a massive claim, right? So what's the proof? Interestingly, the author's main piece of evidence doesn't come from some complex brain scan or scientific study. It comes from a really simple observation about what makes us so different from the rest of the animal kingdom. Just think about it for a second. What do animals worry about? Their concerns are almost always about the now, right? Finding food, staying safe, just making it to the next day. But humans, we're different. We get completely obsessed with questions about where everything came from and what happens in eternity, ideas that are way outside of our own short lifespans. That huge gap is the chasm the author is pointing to. And it's this fundamental difference that leads the author to their most radical claim of all. They say that this way of thinking, this obsession with the before and after, it wasn't something we got through slow, random evolution. No. In their exact words, it was set up/installed. Okay, so let's follow that thought. If this internal drive is installed in every single one of us, what happens next? I mean, how does a personal, internal feeling end up creating these huge external things like entire organizations? Well, the author actually lays out a pretty clear path for how that happens. It's described as a kind of natural progression. It starts with one person's exploration, which sparks an idea. If that idea really connects with other people, it starts to gain followers, it builds momentum. Then, over time, that simple idea gets developed into a more complex theory. And finally, the ones that really stick around, they become stable, organized institutions. And this is where the theory gets even broader than you might expect. See, for this author, these faith groups are not just religions. Not at all. They argue that things like political parties and tons of other ideological movements are all born from that exact same fundamental drive, the drive to find answers and to build a community around those answers. So, if this function is a real part of our mental hardware, then the next logical question is, how do we take care of it? How do we keep it from, crashing or getting buggy? Well, the author offers some pretty clear advice on exactly how to maintain it. And the author's prescription here is maybe not what you'd expect. To keep your function of faith healthy, the advice isn't to just pick one belief system and stick to it, defending it at all costs. Nope. They recommend the exact opposite, to genuinely and comprehensively browse knowledge. Okay, so what does browsing actually mean in this context? Well, the method is really about understanding the whole system. Step 1. Recognize that this function of faith exists inside you. Step 2, study what it produces, all the different religions, the various political ideologies. The goal here isn't to pick a favorite. It's to understand the entire ecosystem of belief. It's all about intellectual curiosity and having a wide lens. And all of this leads us to the biggest question at the very heart of this theory. Why? Why bother doing all this? What's the real benefit of putting in all that work to keep this function healthy? Interestingly, the source text doesn't just hand us a neat little answer. Instead, it kind of turns the question back on us, pushing us to really think about the broader implications. And that really is the final provocative question this whole idea leaves us with. I mean, if we really take this author's premise seriously, what would our world look like if more people actually exercise this function in the way they describe? What could a healthy faith, as defined by this author, mean for all of us, for our collective future? Now that's a thought worth spending some time with.